Hello everyone! In today's video, we dive into the latest article by Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, published in Arab News, titled is A Calculated Long-Term Approach. Before we begin, let me introduce the author. Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, a Saudi businessman, academic, and thought leader. As an adjunct professor at the University of Arizona and advisor, American University of Beirut, Faculty of Food and Agricultural, Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, founder of Golden Grass Inc., he brings a rare blend of vision, expertise, and real-world insight to every article he writes. Dr. Al-Rasheed is also a distinguished author. His upcoming book, Saudi Arabia, Transformation, Uncertainty, and Sustainability, explores the kingdom's evolving economic and social landscape amid global change, offering deep insights into development, resilience, and long-term sustainability. Let's dive in.
What if I told you that the most aggressive, devastatingly effective strategy used by the modern Middle East's biggest power brokers and even the world's most elite financial traders is to just, do absolutely nothing?
I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we are so conditioned to believe that power requires this, massive show of force, the immediate decisive strike. We just naturally think the one who moves fastest and hits hardest automatically takes the prize.
Right, but when you actually step back and look at the real long-term winners, whether you are looking at nation states navigating global conflicts or, institutional money moving billions in the crypto markets, that whole shock and awe playbook completely falls apart.
It really does.
You step into the world of elite, high-level strategy, and you realize that sometimes just waiting in the shadows is the ultimate power move.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of strategic patience. And frankly, it's incredibly difficult to execute.
I bet.
Because it requires mastering your own psychology before you can even attempt to master your opponent.
Welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. Today is Monday, March 23, 2026. And the stack of sources we have today is going to completely change how you view conflict, momentum, and, winning.
Truly. The materials are fascinating.
We are looking at a brand new geopolitical paper by Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, broadcasting these insights right out of Riyadh. And we are pairing it with this really fascinating cross-disciplinary text on technical financial market analysis.
Which is, I have to say, a brilliant pairing.
Right.
On the surface, Middle Eastern geopolitics and technical chart reading look like they exist in two entirely separate universes. But when you look under the hood, they are operating on the exact same behavioral logic.
Totally. So our mission today is to uncover the unified theory of what these sources call the dark strategy. We are going to explore how the exact same principle of letting your opponents exhaust themselves is being used to quietly reshape the modern Middle East. And this is the crazy part, how that exact same logic is used to execute high probability reversals in global financial markets.
It's a universal principle.
Yeah. So for you listening, whether you are trying to understand the shifting global order in 2026, or you're just trying to figure out why your stock portfolio keeps getting wrecked by sudden market shifts, you are going to want to hear this.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the geopolitical side. What exactly is this dark long game that Saudi Arabia is running right now?
Well, to understand the dark strategy, you have to basically throw out all the traditional ideas of overt dominance.
Okay.
If you are looking for Riyadh to assert itself through direct military conquest or, loud table-pounding aggression on the world stage, you are entirely missing the play.
So it's much quieter than that.
Exactly. The strategy is rooted in three very quiet pillars: strategic patience, calibrated opportunism, and the calculated logic of mutual weakening.
Mutual weakening. That is such a fascinating concept.
It really is.
It basically means letting the other guys beat each other up, right? Is this essentially the geopolitical version of the rope-a-dope in boxing?
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. I'm picturing Muhammad Ali against George Foreman. Instead of throwing wild punches and burning all your energy in the first few rounds, you just lean back on the ropes. You protect yourself, absorb the superficial hits, and you just let the heavyweight champion punch himself out until he is completely exhausted.
Right. Yeah.
And then, when he can barely lift his own gloves, that's when you step into the center of the ring and take control.
Yes. What's fascinating here is that analogy perfectly captures the exact mechanics of what Riyadh is doing.
Right.
Rather than stepping into a direct, messy confrontation, they are enhancing their relative position by playing the shadows.
Just letting the other guys tire out.
Precisely. They are deliberately allowing both their regional rivals and their global partners to incur all the heavy political costs. They let other nations suffer the massive resource drains and face the heavy constraints of active conflict.
Wow.
Just like Ali on the ropes, they are letting stronger, more aggressive actors wear themselves down. The brilliance here is that they are outlasting the giants through controlled, disciplined waiting.
But, I mean, if you are sitting on all that wealth and all that regional influence, why play the rope-a-dope at all? Why not just assert your dominance and squash the threats directly?
Well, that's the big question.
Right. Because if you read between the lines of our sources, it becomes very clear that they are avoiding a direct fight because a fight would completely derail their entire domestic future.
Precisely. You really can't understand the strategy without understanding the ticking oil clock that hangs over their entire economy.
The oil clock. It sounds like a doomsday device from a spy novel.
It does sound like that.
But it represents very real, very pressing economics for them.
It absolutely does. Because for decades, the kingdom's global power and domestic stability have been entirely underwritten by hydrocarbons. But that era is, it's fading.
Yeah.
We are entering an age of multipolarity, which essentially means the world is no longer just dominated by one or two superpowers buying oil and providing security. Power is fracturing globally.
Right, the whole landscape is shifting.
And at the exact same time, global decarbonization is accelerating. So if the value of oil plummets before they can completely rebuild their economy, their structural foundation just collapses.
So it's a race.
Yes. They are in a desperate race against time to build a massive diversified economy that doesn't just rely on pumping crude out of the sand.
And they are moving incredibly fast. You brought some of the hard numbers from the text, right?
Right.
Just how massive is this pivot we are talking about?
It is a societal level transformation. I mean, right now, non-oil activities make up about 52% of their real GDP.
Wait, really? Over half?
Over half. That means over half of their economy is already completely decoupled from oil. And that non-oil sector is growing at a massive average of 4 to 5% annually.
Which is just wild when you think about what their economy looked like even like 10 years ago.
Exactly. And look at tourism. Their original Vision 2030 goal was to hit 100 million annual visitors by the end of the decade.
Okay.
They smashed right through that target 5 years early, hitting over 122 million visitors in 2025.
That's a huge jump.
It is. And now they've recalibrated and are aiming for 150 million by 2030.
And to house all those people and build this new economy, they have these massive mega projects, right? Things like NEOM, the Red Sea Project, and Quidia.
Right. Those are advancing rapidly. They're pulling in massive foreign investments in logistics, green tech, sustainable tourism. And even when they hit logistical hurdles, they adapt.
Tough out.
Well, the text notes that the line, that famous massive linear city concept has had its scale recalibrated recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to focus very specifically on technology hubs, manufacturing, and religious tourism. They're being incredibly pragmatic about what works.
But here is the massive catch, and this is where the dark strategy comes back into play.
Yeah.
None of this, not the tourism, not the tech hubs, not the 52% non-oil GDP survives in a war zone.
That is the core takeaway right there. A full-scale regional war, or even just a few isolated retaliatory drone strikes on their desalination plants or their shipping lanes or their oil facilities.
It's ruin everything.
It would instantly devastate investor confidence. It would completely dry up the foreign direct investment that is absolutely required to fund this Vision 2030 transformation. So prioritizing attrition over aggression isn't just them being, polite neighbors. It is a strict economic necessity.
They literally cannot afford the collateral damage of a heavyweight brawl in their own living room.
No, they can't.
Which naturally leads us to the most complex part of this geopolitical chessboard. And just to be clear for you listening, we are looking at this purely as an impartial strategic analysis. We're just analyzing the moves exactly as they are laid out in the text without taking any political sides or endorsing any specific nation's policies.
Right, just looking at the mechanics of the strategy itself.
Exactly. So how do they actually manage the highly volatile giants surrounding them without firing a shot?
This is where the tactical execution of the dark strategy really shines as an exercise in risk management. Let's start with Iran. The text describes Iran as an ideological and existential threat to the kingdom. It is a fundamental clash of models.
Right, so if that threat is existential, how do you handle it without, like, a preemptive military strike?
Through intense, continuous back-channel diplomacy. The sources highlight that they maintain daily communications between ambassadors.
Daily? Wait, that is a staggering amount of communication for two nations with such deep historical animosity. Why talk that much if you fundamentally disagree?
Because it acts as an essential pressure release valve. By maintaining a constant low-level hum of communication, you prevent accidental misunderstandings from rapidly escalating into kinetic strikes.
Oh, I see. Like avoiding an accidental war.
Exactly. If a proxy militia does something unpredictable, Riyadh and Tehran have a direct line to instantly clarify intentions. The text points to the 2023 China-brokered détente as the perfect example of this.
Right, that made huge headlines.
But it wasn't a sudden, warm friendship. It was a highly pragmatic risk management tool designed to contain regional spillover and ensure that friction happens elsewhere, not on Saudi soil. Keep them talking, manage the temperature, and let them exhaust their resources somewhere else.
Okay, logically then, if their primary goal is managing the threat of Iran, how does that shape their calculus with Israel? Because Israel obviously views Iran as a massive shared enemy.
Right, and it creates a dynamic the text calls strategic ambivalence.
Strategic ambivalence?
Yes. There is a clear tactical alignment there against Iranian threats and obvious benefits to normalization like advanced security cooperation and technology transfers. But Riyadh heavily balances that against their need for domestic legitimacy and broader Arab solidarity.
And the source specifically notes that any progress there is strictly conditioned on credible pathways to Palestinian statehood.
Yes, that's a hard line in the text. And from a purely strategic, dark strategy perspective, there's a secondary motive here: mutual weakening. Riyadh wants to ensure that when the dust finally settles on regional crises, Israel doesn't simply emerge as an unchecked dominant force post-crisis.
They want balance.
Exactly. They want all the major players to remain balanced and constrained by each other.
Which brings us to the biggest giant on the board, the United States.
Yeah.
They describe the U.S. relationship as the asymmetric foundation of their security.
Yes, Riyadh still fundamentally relies on U.S. security guarantees and advanced weaponry. But at the exact same time, they are aggressively seeking autonomy.
Yeah, you see that a lot now.
They are actively deepening ties with China and Russia, and they are openly diverging from Washington on global oil policy. The author calls this the burdened patron model.
Burdened patron.
Yeah. Riyadh wants the U.S. to share the heavy costs of regional security, but they demand the U.S. tolerate Saudi Arabia negotiating its own independent, multipolar deals.
See, I have to push back on this because it sounds incredibly risky. Wait, so they are relying on U.S. security guarantees while actively diluting that influence by cozying up to China and Russia? That sounds like a dangerous high-wire act. Could this backfire? Doesn't the patron eventually just get fed up and walk away?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a calculated risk, definitely. But if you look at the underlying mechanics, it actually works in their favor. The text points out that U.S. fatigue and overstretch actually expand Riyadh's bargaining power.
Oh, interesting.
As the U.S. becomes more constrained domestically or distracted by conflicts in Europe and the Pacific, Saudi Arabia becomes even more indispensable as a stabilizing node in the Middle East. It is all about managed tension.
So they play the middle.
Exactly. By making themselves centrally vital to Washington, Beijing, and Moscow all at once, they ensure that no single power can afford to let them fail, but no single power can completely control them either.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
They are literally outpositioning the biggest superpowers on Earth just through controlled waiting and leveraging other people's fatigue. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
This whole concept of letting an adversary overextend, letting momentum totally exhaust itself before you make your move, isn't just for nation states. Our cross-disciplinary financial source proves that this exact same philosophy is the holy grail of high-level financial market trading.
Oh, definitely. The transition from macro geopolitics to micro market mechanics is surprisingly seamless here. In financial markets, whether you are trading Forex, crypto, or traditional equities, amateur traders constantly get wiped out by blind momentum.
Right.
The crowd rushes in, the price surges, and everyone gets caught up in the frenzy.
I pictured exactly like a giant game of tug-of-war.
Yeah.
The market is pulling really, really hard in one direction. It's a massive green trend. And what does the amateur trader do?
They panic.
They panic. They see the momentum going against their position, and they try to pull back with all their might, right when the opponent is strongest. And what happens? They just get dragged face first through the dirt. They blow up their account.
Happens every day.
But a trader, using the dark strategy, instead of pulling with all your might when the market is pulling hard against you, you just hold the rope.
Yeah.
You wait. You wait for that exact moment they lean back too far, their boots slip in the mud, and that is when you execute your move.
That's a great visual. And in technical analysis, that boot slipping in the mud has a very specific name. It's called the dark cloud cover candlestick pattern.
Dark cloud cover. Walk us through what that actually looks like on a screen.
Okay, so it is a classic two-candle bearish reversal formation. Imagine you are looking at a chart. First, you see a massive, powerful, bullish candle. A big green day where the buyers are in absolute undisputed control.
They're feeling confident.
Very. But the very next period, everything changes. You get a bearish red candle. Now, the crucial part is how this red candle forms. It actually opens higher than the previous day's close.
So the initial momentum is still there.
Yeah.
The buyers wake up thinking, great, we're pushing even higher today.
Exactly. It looks like a breakout, but it's a trap because almost immediately that buying pressure completely fails. The sellers take over and drive the price all the way down, forcing that red candle to close below the midpoint of the previous day's green body.
Oh, wow.
It visually represents the exact moment the buyers exhausted all their resources and the sentiment violently snapped back.
But how do you know it's actual exhaustion? Because markets pause all the time, right? How do you know the buyers aren't just taking a breath before surging again?
That is where the discipline of the dark strategy comes in. Just like Riyadh doesn't blindly trust a diplomatic overture without verifying the underlying leverage, an elite trader demands strict confirmatory factors before executing a trade based on a dark cloud cover. You never act on the visual pattern alone.
Right, you need proof that the opponent is actually at a gas.
Exactly. First, you look for expanded volume on that second bearish candle. You need mathematical proof that sellers have actually stepped in with heavy financial force, not just that the buyers took the day off.
Makes sense.
Second, you look for momentum divergence, and you also want to see this happening at major resistance zones.
Unpack that momentum divergence a bit. The text mentions tools like the RSI or the MCD. What are those actually doing?
Well, RSI stands for Relative Strength Index, and MC is Moving Average Convergence Divergence. But you don't need to be a math genius to understand them. Think of them as momentum trackers that look under the hood of the call.
Okay.
Sometimes the price of an asset is still creeping up, making higher highs, but these indicators will show that the actual underlying strength of that upward push is getting weaker and weaker. It is like a car rolling up a hill. It's still moving forward, but the engine is sputtering.
That's a great analogy.
When you see that divergence aligning with a dark cloud cover at a major resistance zone, you know the exhaustion is real.
And even with all that confirmation, the strategy is absolutely obsessed with protecting the downside, right? Like risk management.
Risk management is everything. The text explicitly states that you must place your stop loss decisively above the highest point of that dark cloud cover pattern.
Just in case.
Right. Because if the market suddenly regains its footing and breaks above that high, your thesis is completely invalidated. The opponent wasn't exhausted after all. So you cut your losses instantly and step back into the shadows.
And what about taking profit?
Meanwhile, your profit targets are calibrated downward to prior swing lows. Success in trading, just like in geopolitics, is entirely about waiting for trend exhaustion before entering a reversal. It is the exact opposite of impulsively chasing momentum.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've covered an incredible amount of ground today, from Vision 2030 and daily ambassador back channels in the Middle East, all the way to momentum trackers on a crypto chart.
A lot to digest.
But
But what happens to the global order or the financial markets if everyone adopts this strategy? If everyone is sitting quietly in the shadows waiting for the other guy to make the first move, who drives the future forward?
Man, that is a heavy thought to leave on. Thank you for joining us in the shadows today to explore these sources. Keep digging deep, keep questioning the momentum around you, and we will see you next time.
As we conclude this discussion, we return to the vision expressed by Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed. A vision rooted in clarity, innovation, and a deep commitment to shaping a more stable and interconnected future. For the full article, you can find the complete details in the description below, or visit www.arabnews.com. And if you need it full story about, and to learn more about the author, visit www.tfrasheed.org. If this video gave you insight or inspired your thinking, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more discussions like this. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay curious, and see you in the next video.